All right, recording in progress. So I'm David, alcoholic, addict. Welcome to this Big Book Compendium meeting. Purpose of this book, we are in Bill's story. We are on page 3, the very bottom paragraph, beginning with 1929. Everybody there? Oh, and I got to say, almost everybody's on camera. Thank you. If you're not on camera, but you can come on camera, please, we would love to see your faces. We know sometimes you can't, but I had to ask. All right, where's David? We ready? All right, let's do this. In 1929, I contracted golf fever. We went at once to the country, my wife to applaud while I started out to overtake Walter Hagen. Liquor caught up with me much faster than I came up behind Walter. I began to be jittery in the morning. Golf permitted drinking every day and every night. It was fun to carom around the exclusive course which had inspired such awe in me as a lad. I acquired the impeccable coat of tan one sees upon the well-to-do. The local banker watched me whirl fat checks in and out of his till with amused skepticism.
All right, I got a couple definitions here. So we're going to define jittery, which is extreme nervousness in the 1938 dictionary. And then in the Big Book dictionary, it goes in even further, which is defined as extreme nervousness often associated with physical trembling and a sense of panic caused by the excessive use of alcoholic beverages, also known as the shakes. And then so I began to have extreme nervousness in the mornings. That's in the sentence. And then I also have quorum, which is defined as bounce. So it was fun to bounce around the exclusive course, which had inspired such awe in me as a lad. And then also till, which is defined as bank. It's just like any sort of bank account or bank. The local banker watched me twirl around fat checks in and out of his bank until with amused skepticism.
Thanks, Sam.
Thank you, Sam. Yeah, so okay, let's look at this. So first of all, it starts out with saying in 1929. So we're going to find out in the next page. This is a very eventful year, 1929 for Bill. So he contracted, or it was drawn to golf fever. He went at once to the country. The country that they're speaking of was in Vermont. And here's a statement. My wife applauded. So this is Lois's job, right? Is to applaud Bill making it to the top here. Very misogynistic, very, prejudiced against women. Not a very nice statement by any means. To overtake Walter Hagen. Walter Hagen was a golf champion in the years from 1914 to 1929. Bill's going to be the best. He's setting his goals, and we've seen what he did in the past. He was captain of his baseball team, for his football team, marching band. Don't put it past him. He does real well on Wall Street. He's a millionaire on paper money. And then it says they began to be jittery in the morning. Remember what we talked about as we read this chapters 1 through 8. 3 things I want to identify with in Bill's story. Did I drink like Bill, think like Bill, or feel like Bill? And then as we go through this process, we're looking at progression. This is the 4th progression that we're talking about here. He began to be jittery in the morning. And then it says golf permitted you to drink every day and every night. So I guess he's shooting 36 holes of golf or something, because it doesn't take that many hours to golf 18 holes. But and then it talks about here halfway down, and we were kidding around about this before the meeting. It says, I acquired and look at the wording here, impeccable coat of tan one sees upon the well-to-do. Impeccable, ego, driven by ego. That's an egotistical word in that sentence there. And what is Bill striving for? Bill's striving for the well-to-do. This is what he wants. The local bankers watch me whirl fat checks in and out of his till with amused skepticism. So this golf course too that Bill was at was a country club that was owned by Abraham Lincoln's son. And David's swatting at a proof fly. He is not acting
Sorry.
out.
I said I wasn't going to do that.
But you did it anyways. So this golf club, country club, was Equinox Country Club up in Vermont. It was owned by Robert Todd Lincoln, the oldest son of Abraham Lincoln. And you had to be somebody. This is old money to be in this place, right? So Bill gets in here and he's rubbing elbows, man. And he's arriving, right? You see this statement in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous talking about Bill as in his progression.
Yeah, so just a little bit more on the progressions here. And I don't want to jump too far ahead, but a little later, for those of you who studied the book before, in There Is a Solution, there's a great statement that gets made about the real alcoholic. At some stage of his drinking career, he begins to lose all control of his liquor consumption once he starts to drink. And the reason why I'm pulling that out now, and we stopped sort of in the midst last week of when we were really starting to see Bill have these serious progressions, because just a couple of paragraphs before, if you go up just a little bit on page 3, right in the middle, Bill was saying, well, drink was taking an important and exhilarating part in my life. So he was still at terms with alcohol, it would seem, right? There was all this exciting time in the 20s. He was living this life, like David said, he's rubbing elbows with all these people. He's making money. He had arrived. People are making money off of his work. This is the ultimate ego reinforcement to an alcoholic. Like I mentioned last week, he thought he was going to set out to be right, to be big, to be powerful, to be influential, and the worst possible thing happened. He achieved all that. So alcohol was still a little bit of an ally, but then very quickly, the last paragraph we read last week, the one just above, by drinking assumed more serious proportions, continuing all day and almost every night. And then what's that next progression that we just read? Liquor caught up with me much faster than I came up behind Walter, began to be jittery in the morning. So he is progressing, the illness progressing. His life is devolving, right? He's going down the slope. He hasn't had any significant consequences yet. Spoiler alert, he is going to, right? And how quickly this happens. But if you'd asked Bill to pinpoint the exact moment, unless, I don't know, maybe Howard could tell us this from something else Bill said, he probably didn't know the exact point that he lost all control of his liquor consumption, but we're seeing it in the span of his 2 to 3 paragraphs here as he recounts his history to us. Here we go. Abruptly, in October 1929, hell broke loose on the New York Stock Exchange. After one of those days of inferno, I wobbled from a hotel bar to a brokerage office. It was 8 o'clock, 5 hours after the market closed. The ticker still clattered. I was staring at an inch of tape which bore the inscription XYZ32. It had been 52 that morning. I was finished, and so were many friends. The papers reported men jumping to death from the towers of high finance. I'm just going to pause here real quick. We'll talk about this, but notice high finance, capital H, capital F. That disgusted me. I would not jump. Remember that too. I went back to the bar. My friends had dropped several million since 10 o'clock, so what? Tomorrow's another day. As I drank, the old fierce determination to win came back.
So I'm going to look at this paragraph here and point out some problems here. So first of all, the first problem is all hell broke loose on the New York Stock Exchange. Here's another problem. After one of those days of inferno, here's the first problem. I wobbled from a hotel bar to a brokerage office. It was 8 o'clock, 5 hours after the market had closed. Here's Bill, drunk as a skunk, wobbling from the bar to the brokerage house. 5 hours after the market closed, the ticker still clattered. I was staring at an inch of tape which bore the inscription XYZ32. So back in the day, paper ticket tapes were used to print out stock prices. The company's name was reduced to 4 to 3 letters like they still are today. The letters inscription XYZ-32 means that the company was XYZ trading at $32 a share. No company abbreviation was XYZ existed. Bill just didn't want to put in the book. But my cliff note at the bottom here, if you don't mind me stealing this, if maybe Sam has it, but the actual symbol for that was PKF, and that stands for Penick and Ford now known as Penford Products. So that went all the way down to 32. It had been at 52 that morning. That's a big drop. And then I was finished, and so were my friends. The papers reported men jumping to death. And as David pointed out from the towers of high finance, this is Bill's higher power. Bill is worshiping money. Anything that I worship, anything before God, and at least as a recovered alcoholic, will probably be removed from me swiftly. And that disgusted me. So that's pretty strong language that Bill's saying there, right? It's pretty disgusting. I wouldn't jump. So what's the solution to all of these problems he's talking about? Here we go. Why is he going back to the bar? Because he's broke out in craving. That's why he's going back to the bar. As the Dr. Silkworth has explained to us, I need the 10th drink now more than I needed that first drink. And I'm going to keep going until I can't go any longer, until I'm flat on my face. So Bill's solution for those problems that we pointed out here is the drink. My friends had dropped $7 million. So what? Tomorrow was another day. As I drank, the old fierce determination went back. Liquid courage, guys, right? We're going to go drink, get some liquid courage, put a plan together, go right at it again tomorrow. I'll be fine. Maybe the rest of the world won't, but Bill's got a plan. This is Bill. He's driven. This is ego. This is where the curtain is dropping between him and reality. Reality is not longer even part of his vote. There is no reality for Bill. The curtain's dropped between him and life.
So just to underscore a few of these key points that David was making here. So crash of the market. He was finished financially. So were many friends. He's seeing probably people he knew, or, certainly peers in his industry, committing suicide, jumping from buildings. And what's his feelings about this in the moment of people committing suicide? He's saying, disgust me. There's no way. As bad as things are, there's no way I'm going to commit suicide. And again, towers of high finance, had to call that out. Capital H, capital F. We know when we see these nouns elsewhere in the book, unless it's the beginning of the sentence or just proper grammar, when we see spirit of the universe, creative intelligence in its proper case, it's a reference to a higher power. Right? This was Bill's higher power. And we remember this. He was in law school, wasn't for him, too busy drinking, got really excited by the lure of Wall Street. That was his alpha and his omega. It was everything to him to make a bunch of money and to be influential. But he's disgusted by what he's seeing, people jumping from those towers. He's not going to jump. Went back to the bar. That is our solution. What did we see in our lives? Are we any different than Bill? Problem with the marriage. Go drink. Problem on the job. Go drink. Nothing left to drink at home. Go drink. The solution is always alcohol until it's no longer the solution. So he goes back to the bar. His friends have dropped several million since 10 o'clock. So what? Tomorrow's another day. And as David pointed out, get a little liquid courage. As I drank, the fierce old determination came back. To win came back. It's just a callback again. What did Dr. Silkworth tell us? Men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. So everything's going to hell around me. What kind of effect produced do I need? I need some reassurance. I need some courage. I need some confidence. I'm going to get that out of the bottle.
Hey, let me do, I got a text from Howard, so let me, and we appreciate this, Howard. So to clear things up, to clarify things, so the Equinec Country Club was a private club, meaning owned by its members. Was not owned by Robert Todd Lincoln. He's the oldest son of Honest Abe, the president. Was the president, and he was Robert Todd Lincoln was the president of the board of the directors from 1904 to 1926 of this country club. More importantly, though, the stock that we were talking about, and I had this note, but I didn't bring it up. I missed up on this, but went from 52 to 32, meaning it dropped $84 a share. People committed suicide because they purchased on margin accounts and their notes are being called in. So, jumping out of buildings, guys, right?
We talked a little bit about this last week. We gave a very baseline what it means to buy and sell stocks and have the paper millions. We won't repeat it this week, but again, conceptually is the value of the stock is nothing until you cash out, right? So it's just a magical number that looks good on a piece of paper. Next morning, I telephoned a friend in Montreal. He had plenty of money left and thought I'd better go to Canada. By the following spring, we were living in our custom style. It felt like Napoleon returning from Elba. No St. Helena for me. But drinking caught up with me again. My generous friend had let me go. This time, we stayed broke.
So I do have some footnotes at the bottom of my study guide, and I wanted to read them because they were
Go ahead.
interesting about. So I felt like Napoleon returning from Elba. So the footnote from that says Napoleon Bonaparte, if I'm saying that right, Emperor Bonaparte, Emperor of France between 1804 and 1814, was exiled to the Italian island of Elba in 1915. Napoleon escaped from the island later that same year. And then also from the St. Helena, a footnote from that is just the British island off of the west coast of Africa. He was imprisoned there after a brief reign as emperor in 1815. He died there of cancer in 1821.
Thanks, Sam.
Okay, so as we read this, this says, by the following spring, second sentence here is that by the following spring, we were living in a custom style. So not comfortably, he's talking about an custom style. Bill always has to have the best of everything. There's no second rate for him. He's high finance for this guy. And then so Napoleon, as Sam pointed out, was the emperor of France. He started a war between France, Germany, and Great Britain in 1813 to 1814. And then was banished to, or was, what's my notes say here? So he was banished up to Elba, where he kept his title and his army, and 18 months later, he declared war again. So this time, though, they banished him to St. Helena, which was a bunch of, it was a rocky island, and that's where he died shortly afterwards, and died of cancer, as Sam pointed out there. But it says, this is a fifth progression also in this story here, too. So no St. Helena for me. In other words, it says next thing, it says, but drinking caught up with me again, and my generous friend had to let me go. This is the fifth progression for Bill now, we pointed out. As we go, just pay attention to the progressions for myself anyways. And this is how this chronic illness that I have shows up to me internally, and it affects me externally because of it.
So one of the ways in which I qualify, based on the content of the book, and really based on Bill's story, is in the face of consequences, do you pick up drink again? And so look at all these consequences Bill started experiencing so far. We know he's experiencing some physical consequences now, right? He's having physical effects from his drinking. Had some economic consequences that was outside of him, right? He wasn't unique in this, what happened, with the crash of the stock market. Got saved from it, had a buddy who took him on, got him living in his accustomed style again, got some money flowing back into his pocket. But he could not uphold his new way of life, right? He was beholden to the drink again. The consequences, the possible and existing ones, weren't enough. Drinking caught up with him again. His generous friend had to let him go. And now for Bill, I was going to say this is sort of the ultimate bottom for him financially, but it's going to get even a little worse as we're going to introduce in the next paragraph. But this time we stayed broke. It's a pretty big failure for Bill, remember, who caught the allure and the bug of Wall Street that really whipped him into this frenzy. But this is how bad things got. We went to live with my wife's parents. Just want everyone to think about that for a moment. Imagine moving in with your in-laws. And I love my in-laws. I don't want to live with them, though. We went to live with my wife's parents. I found a job, and I lost it as the result of a brawl with a taxi driver. Mercifully, no one could guess that I was to have no real employment for 5 years or hardly draw a sober breath. My wife began to work in a department store, coming home exhausted to find me drunk. I became an unwelcome hanger-on at brokerage places.
Nothing, Sam? Okay. Okay, so he went to live with his wife's parents. So this is like, it's got to be like humiliating to Bill, correct? And then I found a job and then lost as a result of a brawl with a Uber driver. Oops, there goes my rating. I just got in a fight with an Uber driver. I'm going to lose that damn thing now. And it says, mercifully, no one could guess that I was going to have no real employment for 5 years. Watch the progression here, or hardly draw a sober breath. This is my story. This is how I identify. At the end of my drinking and drugging, I wasn't drawing any sober breaths. I wasn't going to work anymore. I wasn't socializing with any family. I didn't have any money left. We were going to be moving in with my wife was going to move in with her parents. I was going to be on the street or living in my car. My wife began working in a department store. So she worked at Macy's, no commission. She earned $19 a week, which would equate to about $335 a week today, and that kind of money. That's it. That's all she made, $19 a week. And coming home exhausted to find me drunk. I became unwelcome hanging around at brokerage firms. You know, who wants to see Bill drunk bombed out of his mind and showing up? You know, because he said, I haven't taken a sober breath. So he's stumbling into these brokers' houses where he had a lot of success, but now he's not welcome any longer, you know, because of the condition that he's in. So progression, no more ego, is actually smashed. And this is him getting close to his bottom, or about halfway to his bottom here.
Yeah, I think that's really important. It's about halfway through. You know, the way the Bill story is really structured, it's 16 pages. And really, the first 8 are, you know, what he was like. And then the latter ones, 9 through 16, are going to be what happened and what he was like after. And so if we're only on the bottom of page 4, and we know it's what it was like for him through page 8, he's going to sink lower and lower. But things are already pretty bad. Look how much has changed in the last page. I sort of recapped a few of those from page 3, but now he's living with either stayed broke, living with his wife's parents, managed to get a job, lost it as a result of a brawl with a taxi driver, can't stay sober, hardly a sober breath, and his wife has to start to support him. Obviously, you know, socioeconomic and gender equality. Cultures and customs were very different back here in the 1920s and 30s, so not all women worked, right? And I don't know the statistics, but many women did not. So to Bill, this was an insult that he was a high-rolling financier, and now he can't be employed. He's constantly drunk, and his wife has to take a job. And a tremendous tremendous fall for Bill. And then he becomes that guy. I became an unwelcome hanger-on at brokerage places. So he's bumming around, drunk, probably dirty clothes, trying to talk the lingo, trying to stay involved in the mix, and they don't want him around. He's not this wonderkind that he was not that long ago, where he was making everybody money. Now he's an embarrassment. Liquor ceased to be a luxury. It became a necessity. Bathtub gin, 2 bottles a day, and often 3, got to be routine. Sometimes a small deal would net a few $100s, and I would pay my bills at the bars and delicatessens. This went on endlessly, and I began to waken very early in the morning, shaking violently. A tumbler full of gin, followed by a half a dozen bottles of beer, would be required if I were to eat any breakfast. Nevertheless, I still thought I could control the situation. And there were periods of sobriety which renewed my wife's hope.
I have the definition of delicatessens.
Delicatessen?
Yeah, delicatessens, which is just restaurants. So I would pay my bills at the bars and the restaurants. And then it also has a description in the, so I've gotten a couple questions of the book that I'm using. It's the Anonymous Press Study edition of Alcoholics Anonymous. So the footnote here for bathtub gin is a slang term for a homemade liquor popular during Prohibition, commonly made by flavoring a bathtub full of industrial alcohol by temporarily mixing in juniper leaves.
Ugh. You can tell Sam lives out here in the country if she can't pronounce delicatessen, right? We don't have delis out here in the sticks. Go ahead, David.
That's too funny. That's so true, though.
Yeah.
So great description of bathtub gin. I'm not going to expound upon that. Liquor ceased to be a luxury. It's now a necessity. It is he needs it to function. Go to the bottom of page 28 in the Roman numerals in the doctor's opinion in the 4th edition. Men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. He isn't drinking for the effect produced anymore. He's drinking out of necessity. And then it says sometimes a small deal would net him a few $100s and I would pay my bills where at the bars and delicatessens. Why? Because he needed to get alcohol again. He wasn't paying the light bill. He wasn't helping Lois out with the couple $100 that he made. He's going to the bar and to the delicatessens to pay off his bill so he can access more alcohol. And then it says this went on endlessly. This tunnel of his is getting darker and darker and darker. The light is getting dimmer and dimmer. Endlessly, and began to awaken very early in the morning, underline the word shaking violently. This is the progression of this disease. A tumbler full of gin followed by half a dozen bottles of beers would be required. Another word for require would be must. I must have this to survive. You can die from this, guys. You can absolutely die from this. He would eat any breakfast, nevertheless. I still thought I could control the situation. This is delusional. This delusion that he has is internal. An illusion is an external thing, right? If I'm in a parking lot and when it's 100 degrees outside in an asphalt parking lot, my car's parked at the other end of the parking lot, and it looks like there's a big puddle out there by my car, and as I get a little closer, that puddle disappears. That's an illusion, or magicians do illusion. But delusion is an internal condition. Like I believe my own lie. And Bill's believing his own lie here. And it says that there was periods of sobriety which renewed my wife's hope. Boy, do I relate to that completely. And hope was described to me as a vision beyond my present circumstances. And my wife, and I think it was one of the sorriest things I ever did in my life was to steal her hope. I would get a couple days of sobriety and I would make solemn vows like Bill did. And I promised her I would never drink again. And I would drink 3 days later. And she's like, why don't you love us enough to stop drinking? Stealing her hope constantly. She did not understand, nor did I, that the problem is beyond, I have no power, no choice, no control. That no human power is going to get me sober, nor is it going to get Bill sober. So those periods of sobriety were just enough to give my wife back a little bit of hope. And then, as Babe says, if you guys all know Babe, and then I would get back in Mama's bed, I would make the border crossing, but then I would drink again right after that, right? Because I have no power, no choice, no control.
So we had all this sort of rolling, like flowery language. You remember a few paragraphs ago, he's using all this sort of poetic and philosophic language to convince his wife that everything's okay. Now every paragraph that he's writing, each one of these is a horror after horror, and it's chock full of all these progressions and consequences. I love, David, that you brought up, nevertheless, I still thought I could control the situation, and how this epitomizes delusion. We talk so frequently in meetings about, denial. Denial means I understand the situation, and I take a position of rejecting it. That's not what Bill is doing here. Bill is completely delusional. He truly believes that he has things under control despite the reality of the consequences. And he talks about the sort of rat race he was in here, this cycle, this repeated action. Sometimes a small deal, net a few $100s. I'm going to pay my bills at the bars and delicatessens, and I'm going to take more booze out on credit, and I'm going to get a little more money, I'm going to pay it off. This went on endlessly. And again, a callback to the doctor's opinion, page 29. It talks about after they succumb to the desire again, as so many do, and the phenomenon of craving develops, they pass through the well-known stages of a spree, emerging remorseful with a firm resolution not to drink again. This is repeated over and over. The alcoholic existence is a never-ending spiral. You know, the spiral looks like it's very circular. The same things are happening, but it goes down, down, down. Gradually, things got worse. Gradually, things got worse. The house was taken over by the mortgage holder. My mother-in-law died. My wife and father-in-law became ill. We're not talking about a flu here, right? You're saying somebody's ill. We're talking serious illness. Things are getting really awful for Bill. And it's amazing that that paragraph is just a short little paragraph, 2 sentences, right? But what's the first one? After all of these terrible progressions we're seeing and all these consequences, he's saying, oh yeah, getting worse.
Yeah, so, and they lost the house bill, so it is getting worse, but luckily for those guys, FDR had signed a bill into law saying that you can't have your house taken away from you. But you do have to pay something. But Bill could have probably paid the mortgage if he wasn't paying the bars and the delicatessens, or at least came close to giving him something. But he needed his liquor, right? He needed his liquor. And the other things that happened is I think Lois had 3 pregnancies too that even complicated things more. And I think she had to have a surgery. I got a note here from Howard. She had 3 pregnancies treated surgically and medically. So a lot of things going on here, guys. The bottom is falling out. Like he keeps digging this bottom.
Then I got a promising business opportunity. Stocks were at the low point of 1932, and I had somehow formed a group to buy. I was to share generously in the profits. Then I went on a prodigious bender, and that chance vanished. Guys, what's going on with Bill here? Everything is falling apart. Lost all of his money. He can't stay sober. Can't get a job. Living with the in-laws. Now they lost the house to the mortgage holder. People are dying. People are sick. And then he gets a little shining light, a little beacon. Some other investors, some peers, maybe some people he had worked with in the past said, let's put a deal together. The market is at its lowest point. So remember, the crash was 29. Country's been in pretty sorry state from 29 to 32. Market's at its all-time low. When's the best time to get into the market? Well, when stocks are low, right? Because then you hope you get a big rally and you get all those millions on paper again. So, and I love how he's a little appropriately deprecating with himself about this. I had somehow formed a group to buy. He's not even giving himself any credit. Think about what Bill could have said here and would have said a few pages ago. You know, calling back on my aptitude for leadership and all my successes. I brought everybody together. And I'm saying, somehow, I formed a group to buy. And what was going to happen by virtue of this deal they were going to put together, he was going to share generously in the profits. What's Bill thinking at this point? Well, if I can just get back to my financial position, I can get back to that accustomed compensation, that accustomed way of living, the drinking is going to be okay. I'm going to be able to take care of my wife, take care of my father-in-law because his wife died. Everything will be okay. But what happens? What's what always happens to the alcoholic? I went on a prodigious bender, and that chance vanished.
So we know today that we have a 3-fold illness. Bill doesn't know anything about this. No one's introduced anything to him yet. We haven't met Dr. Soquist by any means. So he is suffering from when he takes a drink that he breaks out in craving. And prior to that, he has this obsession, which never ends because he's always drinking, and he has this spiritual malady. But he thinks, again, some external condition is going to fix this this problem that he has, and it's not true. And to talk about the finance part, to build upon what David said, in 1929, October 29th in 1929, U.S. Steel was worth $262 a share. But by 1932, that same companies were $22. The market wasn't getting any better. It's getting worse, but to David's point, that's when you buy if you got some money, right? It's going to take 27 years for the market to ever even recoup from 1929 to get back to the territory that it was. It's going to take forever, and it does. Some of us lived through 2008. But then it says in the last sentence there that I went on a prodigious bender, and that chance vanished. Dude, what is it? What kind of a bender do you think that was? Howard uses this term, supersized. That's what it was. It was a totally supersized bender that he went on. I mean, it was like he had it all sitting in his hands. We talked about the guy who drank right before, a promising opportunity came. We always drank at the most inopportune time. Bill had no power, no choice, no control. That's what I'm identifying with. No power, no choice, no control. Forever. I must find a power that's greater than myself that I can rely on, that I can access to. Just saying for me here.
I have the definition of what is that word? Prodigious?
Prodigious, yeah.
Prodigious, which is defined as vast. So a vast bender that he was on. It's a huge bender.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Prodigious. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, were you going to give it? Did you give that definition? Because my screen froze. I'm sorry.
That was prodigious. She just gave it, yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I didn't hear that.
All good.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay.
I woke up. This had to be stopped. I saw I could not take so much as one drink. I was through forever. Before then, I had written lots of sweet promises, but my wife happily observed that this time I meant business. And so I did. One of the great things I love talking about, especially when we go into treatment centers, is talking about the solemn oath, the swearing off. Right? And I think I got this originally from Mark Houston, but maybe he got it from a speaker before him. Talks about every time I swore off, I believed it. You could have put me on a lie detector, on a polygraph, and I would have passed with flying colors. They would have said, David is absolutely telling the truth. He's never going to pick up another drink again. He's done. He's good and for all. That's what I believe. What did the doctor describe to us going back to Roman numeral 28? Cannot differentiate the true from the false when it comes to my drinking. It's not an act of denial. It's an act of incomprehension, of delusion. I'm not able to have a sane response to the concept of picking up a drink. So when I say I'm never going to drink again, I believe it. But am I capable of not picking up a drink again? I am not, prior to being recovered from that hopeless state of mind.
So so it says I woke up and this had to be stopped. I saw I could not take so much as one drink. This is a moment of clarity Bill's having here. This is not something that he's had in the past, or at least mentioned in the writing so far. A moment of clarity where his eyes open up and maybe God froze the liar in him just for that moment so he could see the truth. But Bill thinks that he's done forever, meaning that on willpower, I'm going to be able to stop on my own willpower. Well, he doesn't know that what solution he's going to give us in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Then he said I had written lots of sweet promises for my wife, happily observed that this time I meant business. So Bill made lots of promises in the family Bible, and Bill in Bill's home in New York had this is my notes here. He has 12 dated entries of his promises to Lois of quitting, signed and dated. He was very sincere. So here, and no different than what I did with my wife, right? Or probably no different than you did with your spouses or family members. And also, we got to look at here. This is also a progression. This had to be stopped. Bill hasn't had this frame of mind before. This is brand new to him. This is the first half of the first step to understand that I'm powerless over alcohol. He's starting to understand something here. But again, his solution is going to be based off of willpower.
So he's sworn off. Wife saw that he meant business, and he did mean business. However, shortly afterward, I came home drunk. There'd been no fight. Where had been my high resolve? I simply didn't know. It hadn't even come to mind. Someone pushed a drink my way, and I had taken it. Was I crazy? I began to wonder for such an appalling, read that again. Was I crazy? I began to wonder for such an appalling lack of perspective seemed near being just that.
So let me just jump back real quick. And yeah, Howard sent a note, and I had this note in my book because I go to his big book studies, so I stole his notes because that's why you go to big book studies, write down other people's experience and knowledge of the book. So it says that he went a prodigious bender. So if you want to know what that is, that's the Jersey Lightning story that you can read in AA Comes of Age that Bill talks about in there. Something to look at, look forward to. Back to what David just read. Shortly after home, I came home drunk. There had been no fight. There's no reference to that first drink. There's no reference there at all to the first drink. I just came home drunk. He doesn't realize that he breaks out in craving like we know today, that once I have the first one, I'm going to have the second one, and then I have the third. I set out to have 2, and I have 22. And then it says, where have been my high resolve? Willpower. Where is my willpower here? Why isn't it working for me? He's wondering. Simply didn't know. He didn't know. Why can't I just stop for my wife? Why can't I stop to put this mine? Again, no human power, including my own, is going to get me sober. Someone pushed a drink my way, and I had taken it. I didn't even think twice about it. I just took the drink. Was I crazy? No, you're insane when it comes to alcohol. Unclear thinking. That's what he has here, is unclear thinking. Can't tell the truth from the false. I began to wonder for such an appalling lack of perspective. Bill's starting to see a little bit of truth here, but he ain't going to be able to pull it off on his own willpower. And the end seemed to be near for him. He's starting to see the truth in this thing, but he doesn't know the solution. And he does. I think he understands abstinence, but he can't pull that off because of the obsession.
Yeah, the problem with where Bill is now, when we take this all for granted, we're spoiled today. Problem Bill is experiencing at this point is he doesn't know the problem, he doesn't know the solution, and he has no concept of how to get from the problem to solution because he doesn't have anything. The only thing that Bill's experiencing is alcoholic illness progression and all the consequences that are coming with it. And by the way, like David said, Howard's got an amazing study. Howard, please put your stuff in the chat again every Sunday. Here's the best part about when you go and study with a guy like Howard or a guy like our buddy Terry is on here tonight. When you steal a little nugget that they come up with, after you share it 3 times, then you get to say it's yours, right? David's sponsor, Judd, told us that, right? So that's how it works here, okay? So what's going on with Bill? He had sworn off. His wife believed him. So did he. Then he came home drunk. No fight. No fight. Where was the high resolve? When he said, I'm done, good and for all. His word, his integrity, his oath, right? Worthless. Was I crazy? You know, I talk about this a lot because the second step talks about restoration to sanity. I've got plenty of things I could write down on a legal pad. I'm sure everybody else here could do. Many of the quote unquote crazy things that we did prior to being recovered. Okay. Don't know if Bill could have been diagnosed as crazy or something else. But what I do know is he was crazy as it relates to alcohol. His brain was completely incapable of differentiating the true from the false. He was in complete delusion. He believed he was never going to drink again when he swore it and told his wife. He was powerless to fulfill that commitment. Renewing my resolve. I tried again. Some time passed, and confidence began to be replaced by cocksureness. I could laugh at the gin mills. Now I had what it takes. One day I walked into a cafe at a telephone. In no time I was beating on the bar, asking myself how it happened. As the whiskey rose to my head, I told myself I would manage better next time. But I might as well get good and drunk then. And I did.
I have the definition of cocksureness, which is described as a feeling of assurance, often without good reason. So in the sentence, Some time had passed and confidence began to be replaced by a feeling of assurance, often without good reason.
Cockiness, right? We shorten it to cocksureness down to cockiness. I hope everybody is relating to Bill's story. And I think we said, I'm sure David said in his introduction, actually, I know he did, as you're studying this story, did you think like Bill, drink like Bill, feel like Bill? Renewing my resolve. So in the face of failure, in the face of being unable to keep my word, renewing my resolve, I tried again. What was my experience going through life as an alcoholic? That there wasn't an obstacle, whether it was animate or inanimate, that I couldn't outthink or outmuscle. That's what Bill's doing right here. He's saying, okay, I made this resolution, and so I drank, not real happy about it, but I'm going to double down this time. His history, my history, our collective histories is we are tenacious. That's a massive characteristic that's very common in the alcoholic. We persevere, we carry on, we always find a way to move forward and get what we need. So that's what Bill's showing forth again here. Renewing his resolve, try it again. Some time passed, and then again, what's the worst possible thing that can happen to an alcoholic? He can be right. He said, okay, I'm doubling down. I'm going to outthink and outmuscle this thing. So then he's physically sober for a while. He's white knuckling it, but he's a little confident. And then he gets foolishly cocky. He's laughing at the gin mill. So he's way over the top cocky if he's doing that. And then what happens? Goes into the bar to use a telephone. Next thing you know, he's drunk, pounding on the bar. Suddenly, right? Later, we're going to get into that and more about alcoholism. We're going to talk about suddenly a thought occurring to someone. Suddenly, Bill's making a phone call and finds himself drunk. I'm going to steal this from David because I've heard him say it probably 300 times. If I could plan around suddenly, I wouldn't need a program of recovery because I would just call David and be like, hey, suddenly is going to happen on next Tuesday. I'm going to suddenly pick up a drink. Can you slap it out of my hand? Right? I don't know when suddenly is going to happen. Right? I have to have my spiritual suit of armor around me so that if suddenly happens, I get through it with God.
So the prior paragraph here, he was doubting his sanity. This paragraph's a little bit different here, but I'm going to jump a little ahead in the book just because we need to have clarification what sanity and insanity looks like. According to Bill, when we're in Jim's story on page 37, and he puts whiskey in his milk, here's a good description, a great description of what insanity looks like. Whatever the precise definition, first paragraph on page 37 in the More About Alcoholism, whatever the precise definition of the word may be, we call this plain insanity. Here, listen for it, guys. How can such a lack of proportion of the ability to think straight be called anything else? Tie that together with what Bill's going on, what he's doing here. It is absolutely insane to think that he can manage well. He talks about renewing his resolve, his willpower. He's going to try again. And then he gets like Sam talked about and David said, he's overconfident. He's so certain that this can't happen again. And then yet he can laugh at Jim Mills. Now I have what it takes. One day I walked into a cafe in no time. That's a timeline. No time. Dude, it doesn't matter when. For the recovered alcoholic or the person who is in recovery today, any diversion from the steps is going to set me up for a relapse. Any diversion from the steps at all. Am I safe and protected in step 10? Do I have a conscious contact with God in 11? Am I doing the 3 parts of step 12 in my life today? Have I forgotten what step 1 means to me? That I came to believe that a power greater than myself can restore me to sanity? Have I turned my will and my life over to the care of God? Have I done my inventories? Have I gone to God with my defects of character? Have I written out my list and have I made all my amends? And I know I bounced through the steps there, but any diversion of that is going to set me up for a relapse. Bill has no recovery, and yet he goes into a gym bar, and in no time at all, he's picking up a drink. I was beating on the bar, asking myself, how did this happen? See if you identify with this in the basement of the crack house or at the bar. I don't care where you're at, or behind a dumpster, as Paige says, smoking crack with a stranger. As the whiskey rose in my head, I told myself, this is delusional as crap. This is a lie because I know the truth today. I would manage better next time, but I might as well get good and drunk. dude, you ain't got an option here. You have no control over the amount you're going to drink now because I have no power, no choice, no control. And I did. So the question is at the very end of that paragraph and everything that we read at this point, do I identify with Bill? This is why it's so important to take guys, and Howard says this, David says this, I say this, and probably the whole group says this. It's imperative that I take these guys through the steps quickly through the big book. I have summaries that I use to take guys through the work here to get them to God, because no human power is going to get me sober. But later on, jump on these big book studies as David and I have done for many 24 hours and sit down with my sponsees and take them through this work. Take this through this book, sometimes word by word. I don't necessarily do that with everybody. I kind of suggest to them strongly they come to our big book study, go to Howard's big book study, and go to other literature-based meetings, not discussion meetings necessarily, so that I can understand what this text is telling me by someone that has been armed with the information about themselves and about this text.
Drink like Bill, think like Bill, feel like Bill. As the whiskey rose to my head, when I'm getting the effect produced, and it's probably already eluded me because I wanted to have a little bit, but I had a whole bunch. I told myself I'd manage better next time. Like David said, delusion. But I might as well get good and drunk then. So I'm probably not making a choice about this because I probably triggered that craving. But it's one thing for me to experience craving and trying to be fighting it. It's another for me to just say, to heck with it. Screw it. I already started, so I'm just going to roll with it. Devil may care. All right, we'll do one more paragraph. Although, well, now you know what? I think we're gonna pause here. We're gonna stop here for today. A couple minutes.
Let me hold it before you pause though. So
please.
Remember we talked to I brought up the Jersey Lightning story, and Rob already put it in the chat. I just haven't been looking we're talking about that prodigious bender on page 5, third paragraph here. You can watch that. There's a YouTube video of that, and it's called A Gift of Hope. Is it up there? It's already up there. Yeah, Rob's
Howard showing. Bill
okay.
W. Yeah.
Yeah. So watch that thing. You'll see the experience. These actors are pretty darn good, and why not learn all I can about this? So I'm armed with the facts about myself, about the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, so I can go out there and practice these principles. I've had a spiritual awakening. It's my obligation to go and do this today. I have no fear about this thing. I'm open to all the help that I can get. 3 things I'm trying to do every single day of my life. I'm trying to always remain a student in Alcoholics Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous, or any anonymous that I go to. Then I want to be a practitioner of these steps, practice these principles all in my fair. But then I get to be a teacher because of you people, because of the people who taught me. I get to do this today. I get to do this. I'm so blessed.
If there are no teachers in AA, how in the hell am I going to learn anything? But I got to stay a student and a teacher at the same time. We grow and we learn, we study together. This is a textbook. It's intended to be read and studied. The entire purpose of Alcoholics Anonymous, the meetings of fellowship that we call Alcoholics Anonymous, is we're supposed to get together and study this to teach and practice the 12 steps to help new people. That's it. That's it. Quite simple. All right, now I'll wrap up for next week.